You're welcome back to Breakfast Central. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu recently submitted a fresh list of 32 ambassadorial nominees to the Senate for confirmation, comprising 15 career diplomats and 17 non-career appointees, while some hailed the list as a strategic blend of experience and intellect. Others, including former diplomats, have raised serious concerns about the integrity and competence of certain nominees. Ambassador Joe Keshi even suggested that some on the list need to be cooling their heels behind bars. Now, join us to unpack the legal, ethical, and national implications of this appointment is a former chairman of the Nigerian Bar Association Abuja branch, who is also a partner at Tribune Rockwood Solicitors, Mr. Folarinwa Aluko. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Aluko, and thanks for joining us on Breakfast Central this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure.
Now, my first question is, what's your assessment of the 32-man list that was sent by the president to the Senate? How do you, what's your take on it?
So from a legal point of view, and that's a fantastic question, great way to start the conversation. I think the primary issue that we have here, and I think this is one of the things that has caused a lot of the ruckus, with regards to the list, stems from one of the biggest, what I would consider to be one of the biggest challenges with the Nigerian, and that would be the fact that we operate the American presidential system, right? On top of what you consider to be a British parliamentary style civil service, and these two systems are very different. They have checks and balances that operate very differently, and the organs and the functions of these systems operate in very, very different ways. So looking at the list from a legal point of view, 471, sub 1 of the Constitution grants the president the power to appoint ambassadors, principal secretaries, grants the president a wide range of powers. So to that extent, in terms of the legality of the decision to nominate these persons, I would say that the president does have the power. And this really stems from the fact that, using the American presidential system as a framework, we see that the president is the primary spokesperson of the country. And the idea or the philosophy is that because the president is elected in an election, then whatever ideals, principles, and philosophies that the president shares, are held by the majority of the people. And so I would say that the ambassadorial list actually should be a telltale sign of the vision of the president with regards to Nigeria's foreign policy. I think that is a very critical part of the conversation that is being left out, from the public square. That our ambassadorial list, is an outward-facing list. This conversation is outward-facing and not inward-facing, in terms of policy. So if we're scrutinizing the list, we should be looking at how fit these persons are with regards to the task of managing Nigeria's image in the various countries that they'll be assigned to. So I think that's where the real challenge comes, and I'm sure we'll go into some of the deeper issues, in the conversation. But I would say that one of the features of the American presidential system is that because the appointment of ambassadors and diplomats is pretty much done at the behest of the president, you find that it is often used as a means to further political and personal interest. So you find that in the American system, you find that at the moment they run a two-party system, which is very deeply political and deeply divided along ideological lines. So you find when the president appoints any person to any position, it is somewhat representative of their ideological beliefs, and Trump plays it out very clearly in the American battleground. So we see that translate here to Nigeria. My only challenge is that, number one, from the point of view of an ideological framework, it is pretty much difficult to decipher what the ideological framework of Nigerian leadership has been, perhaps for the last maybe 20, 30 years. It's been very, very difficult. And you would agree with me, and I'm sure most Nigerians would agree with me, that in terms of our foreign policy objectives and our foreign our image, Nigeria's image in the committee of among the Committee of Nations, Nigeria has had a diminishing, continued to play a diminishing role, and so that does raise significant concerns for me, and I think it should also for many Nigerians.
Okay. Let's also look at this. I mean, the legal implication that I would love for us to touch on will be on the aspect of looking at some of the names who definitely will be presented before the Senate. We do understand that these names must go through security check. The Assembly will have to do a due diligence on these names. And then also we hear that even after these names have been approved, the countries in which they will be sent will also have to do their own due diligence as well. I know this is a clear conversation that many have had. And should, in case the countries that these nominees have been sent to hereby or therefore reject them, is that possible? Is that possible that countries can say, oh no, because of certain records of this individual, we cannot allow this person to sit here as an ambassador representing or as an envoy of your country in our territory? Is that possible?
Yes, it is very possible, and we have many recent examples of this happening. I recall watching very recently. I forget the name of the country now, but you had President Trump speaking to the president of another country whose ambassador had openly campaigned for his opponent for in the last election, and had campaigned very vigorously on social media against President Trump. I think it's Australia, if I'm correct. And so the work or the job of an ambassador really is to represent a country in another country, and that representation involves, there's a lot of, it's public relations, it is ensuring that we have a cordial and reciprocally cordial relationship, with this country. So in international law, you think of it as a principle of what you may call the corollary of the contract, doctrine of contract of offer and acceptance. Because the receiving country must accept this person as an ambassador. And the status of ambassador comes with significant, well, in Nigeria we consider them to be perks, but it does come with significant responsibilities and privileges as well. So the receiving country or the host country does have the right to conduct their own security checks on whoever would be appointed or whoever has been appointed as an ambassador, and decide upon, decide whether they can work with this person. And it does show, it will definitely show a possibility of failure if there's a challenge to the nomination of ambassador, by any country. So once those signs become obvious and visible, clearly that ambassador will have challenges working in that country.
Okay. Now, Mr. Aluko, let's look at the intersection between morality and legality, and that brings me to this question. One of the names that has raised a lot of eyebrows and elicited comments is the appointment of the immediate past chairman of INEC, in the person of Professor Mahmoud Yakub, who superintended over the elections of Mr. President. Some analysts see it as, blurring the lines. They see it as a quid pro quo deal. That, okay, you superintended my elections, I got elected as president, okay, here's your reward. Or are we making a mountain out of a molehill? Some have said morally it's wrong and sends a bad signal about our democracy. And others said, what's the big deal? He's qualified, he's finished his tenure as INEC chairman. As INEC chairman, he worked with commissioners and he didn't run the show alone. How do you respond to commentary on the appointment of Professor Mahmood Yakub?
Fantastic question again. And Professor Mahmood Yakub is, one of several names that have really thrown up significant concerns. In my opinion, I think two things can be true at the same time. I think that, it is often said that the reward for hard work is more work. So you in any system or any organization, you want to ensure that people who perform creditably well, have the opportunity to also do the same thing, have more opportunities to perform creditably well. The question, and I think the reason why there are questions around the former INEC chairman's nomination center really around the outcome of the last national election, and the role that the then INEC chairman played in that election, particularly with regards to the various checks and balances within the electoral process. And I would say that to a very large extent, yes, when you look at the procedure for nominating ambassadors, even in the US, because our political system is based on the US president. So even in the US, there are concerns about nepotism, about the use of this presidential power, presidential discretion, to reward political allies, and those concerns are valid. The person may be credible, but the concerns are valid and they must be heard, because at the end of the day, these persons are being represented, are nominated to represent Nigeria. The only challenge that we may have with this plan is that, number one, there are concerns that the nomination should go through Senate scrutiny, and at the moment, it is rather doubtful, if you were to gauge the public temperature. And this is now the moral component or the ethical component of this competition. It is doubtful as to the extent to which the Senate can actually provide a thorough and people-centered review or scrutiny of the list. And back to Professor Mahmood Yakub, in my opinion, Nigerians have clearly issued a scorecard to President Mahmood Yakubu, and you find that this scorecard is widely divided along perhaps political lines, party lines, and so on, and it is one that has divided the country. So the question then is, what then makes this person qualified to represent Nigeria abroad? And I think that is really the question that we should ask. I think the flip side of this conversation also centers around this idea that the ambassadors, particularly the non-career appointees, that these positions are pats on the back, or they are a way of saying thank you or well done. But in actual fact, these positions are very sensitive and should entail a lot of work. When you look at foreign ambassadors who come to Nigeria or ambassadors of other countries, you find that there's always they are very busy projecting the image of their country, and they engage in a lot of hard work. Somehow on this side of the Atlantic, we tend to see these positions as, to use a colloquial expression, entering into a permanent site. And that is really wrong, because it does create a difficulty in assessing the work that person has done. Mm-hmm. I do personally, if you were to ask me, I have problems with the appointment of professors and academics to these administrative positions, because I believe that professors and academics should remain in our universities and in their, which is suffering significantly, but back to Professor Yakub, not to make this about him in particular, I think there are definitely ethical concerns and considerations, and those ethical concerns should be the Senate should, because the Senate, of course, the members of the Senate represent the people of Nigeria, so they should be heard and ventilated through the Senate with regards to the scrutinization of it.
All right. There's one question everyone is also asking, which has got to do with the presence of a name that's on that list. I mean, two names, but let me start with one of them. Senator Jimoh Ibrahim, representing Ondo. His name was also there. I mean, legally, this means he's going to abandon ship in the assembly and then move on to this assignment. I want to believe so. Or what does this mean? Does he also have the right to actually reject that nomination and still also remain in the House? So that's one question. I mean, we here may know the answers, but for the benefit of our viewers, it's one of the most frequently asked questions on that list. Another frequently asked question is the case of the legality, especially when it has to do with the international community, of another name that's on that list, which happens to be names of persons who have been invited by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Legality, or better still, legally, what does this mean for these ambassadors when they go to abroad, to the countries where they are assigned to? How will this affect Nigeria, looking at the fact that the one who's coming as an ambassador has a pending legal case with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, maybe at one time, and then he is also representing the country? So these are two questions I want you to take your time to look at them. One, that of Senator Jimoh Ibrahim, and secondly, representing Nigeria with a tainted image and name as well.
Fantastic questions. These questions are very, very complex and very complicated. I'll start with the last one because I think that, for me, represents the more critical concern for the country. And I think the big challenge, and you're very correct, the president in the American presidential system, the president has the power to appoint. So the president holds the power and then delegates this power to the appointees, as the case may be. Now, the president's appointees are perceived as the moral, ethical, and political surrogates of that president. And so it does behoove on, the president, and on talking about Nigeria now, on the president to ensure that the persons who are appointed or who are nominated, both nominated and appointed to hold positions, are persons who have gone through a very rigorous background check and also are persons of proven integrity. Now, the big challenge with and I think for me, where the matter hits the road is in the, if you may call it, consider it to be the politicization of the undue weaponization of our law enforcement agencies, or of the use of petitions to law enforcement agencies. And if we tell ourselves the truth, I would say that it's clearly something that I'm not happy about it. But you find that it is not uncommon for people to sponsor petitions against persons that they have or that have actual political ambitions with a view to tarnishing the image of those persons, or with a view to getting them entrenched in the in the criminal justice process with to sully their image, if I may use that expression. And that for me is a very big concern, because our law enforcement agencies are supposed to be independent and neutral. And it is on that basis that, from an ethical point of view, when you have an independent law enforcement agency, that the moral rectitude to demand that any person who is facing prosecution on corruption grounds or any similar for the commission of any offense, should on a moral basis step down from any appointive or nominatory role. But in a situation where any person can file a petition against anyone, and the law enforcement agencies, against the provisions of the Administration of Criminal Justice Law and Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which often requires some sort of scrutiny and investigation before any sort of arrest or charge is made. But what you find today is that arrests are made, sometimes, very grand arrests at the cost of the taxpayer. and then because you arrest persons, prematurely before investigations are taken place, you have to charge these people to court, and you charge people to court with minimal, almost no evidence. It does create, and then the courts are clogged with so many cases that are not going anywhere. It becomes a problem. And so I think against that background, it is easy for some people to say he still remains innocent. He enjoys the presumption of innocence guaranteed by Section 6 of the Constitution. And unless a court of competent jurisdiction has found such a person to be guilty of an offense, then that person is presumed innocent. That is the legal standard. But in truth, the ethical and the moral standard should be that once a person is facing, any question about their conduct or their moral standing, then on an ethical basis or the moral basis, that person should step down. But given the propensity of, our criminal justice system to be weaponized, it creates cause for pause. So I would say that to a large extent, from a moral or ethical point of view, yes, people should step down, but then you can file a petition today against any person, and if one is not careful, it may lead to criminal prosecution that may not go anywhere, and that may be the basis for so the process becomes the punishment. Getting the person into the process will suffice to punish that person. So I would say that from a moral or ethical point of view, yes, that should be the case. Any person facing, and it shouldn't just be moral or ethical, concerns relating to cases that have been charged to court. We should also consider moral or ethical concerns that are raised by the public that do not have made their way to court. So if somebody, for example, is accused of being a sponsor of terrorism, quote unquote, for example, I don't see any reason why that person should be, with credible evidence, of course, I don't see any reason why that person should be to take up any position unless and until, they manage to clear their name. Now, to the second issue of the president appointing a sitting member of the Senate, as an ambassador or nominating a sitting member of the Senate or sitting member of the legislature as an ambassador, I think this practice is one that is not uncommon, especially if you look at the American presidential system. Again, I'll point you to President Clinton, President Trump, and the immediate past president, President Biden, who made key cabinet appointments, from the United States Senate and the House. So I don't see any challenges there beyond, the political ramifications of these decisions. Because I think it would be essentially a political decision, and I'm intrigued to see what the process will be like in terms of scrutiny.
All right. Okay, Barrister, look, you've broken that down. We're out of time, unfortunately, but thanks for helping us to see the legal aspect in this. I know with days to come, there will be more conversations. I think all eyes are on the National Assembly to see how the checks will be carried out. Maybe the scrutiny will lead to some names being dropped, or like Nigerians have predicted already, it's just going to be a rubber stamp just like that. But thanks for your time. We look forward to having you.
Thank you, Mr. Aluko. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.